Uh, a little bit of a, introduction to this. My name is Addie Tolliver. I'm the Assistant Director for the Center for Teaching Excellence. So my office is right outside in case you want to stop by the conversations. Very excited to be here. In fact, I will do something else too. I'm going to use a microphone so you're able to hear me, but also more importantly for the recording to be better. So very excited about talking about inclusive teaching. Uh, did a workshop about this topic earlier this week for graduate students, got some feedback. So this is a kind of an interesting term, right? Because if you think about the techniques that are in inclusive teaching, they're just good, just pedagogical techniques. But I would say that a couple years back, like this term inclusive teaching just became more popular, and it coincided with the publication of this book called Inclusive Teaching by Vijay Sathi and Kelly Hogan. And I think they're from the University of North Carolina. And Vijay Sathi actually came a couple years back and was a keynote speaker at our Teaching Effectiveness Symposium. So we were able to have her present to our faculty, and it was really good. And all of these techniques are just wonderful, right? So, so the first inclusive teaching technique that I wanted to talk about, it's something that you already did, right? Like put your names on a name tent and put your pronouns, like how you like to be called. And the reason why I asked you to put your birth month is just a technique whenever you are asking for student participation. Sometimes instead of single people out, they say, okay, we're going to go by birth month. And so who are the January babies? They start first, and then people know kind of the order that we're going to be following. It's kind of at random. So we're not like, just putting somebody on the spot. They kind of see it. We can just figure out other ways of calling people. So if I'd be like, put in, your state that you were born in. So you just go by alphabetical order, so you can just change things and could be as suggested from the students. So this is a cool way for you to start doing. It's kind of low stakes, right? But you can also communicate with the participants on your sessions and by name, which makes them feel a lot more included, right? Like instead of, hey, you in the back. So I can say, oh, hi, Sarah. What do you think about this? So that's the first kind of demonstration of a technique. And also, knowing people's pronouns is important just so that people are addressed the way they want to be addressed. Let me see if this is going to work out. So the CTE, these are a little bit of the services that we offer. We do workshops and different teaching techniques. We do individual consultations. I'm just going to glance on some of these techniques, right? Like we're not going to touch on all of them. So feel free to contact us. And there's our email at the end to kind of set up a one-on-one consultation so we can be more specific about the courses that you teach and kind of practical ways that we can implement these techniques into your specific teaching in your courses. So there you go. I'm going to give you 2 minutes and I'm going to time these 2 minutes. I would like for you to think, of your name so you can share. It's going to be an easy one. The program that you're part of, and think back of a time in your learning career as a student that you felt included by a teacher, right? So go back into maybe K through 12, maybe elementary school, pre-K, or higher education, grad school, that you felt included in the classroom. So I will be intentional and actually put a timer for 2 minutes. I am not going to sing, but you can pretend that I'm singing that. Okay, let's do that. Think about that. If you're ready, you can also raise your hand and we can just move on from the time. You also ready, Alexis? Oh, sorry. Okay. Nobody online? Anybody that's watching the recording, are you ready for this? Okay. So, just as a little pause, this is also an inclusive teaching technique, right? Like if this was a classroom with more people, perhaps it would give a little more time, but saying how much time that you're going to give to the students, actually giving them time for people to think about it before you call on people or before they volunteer to participate. That is something that will give them time to think and be prepared and not feel like they're, feeling anxious or feel they're going to be called upon without being prepared. The other thing is having the prompt on the screen, because sometimes you might ask a question out loud and send the group to participate in the activity. and they just forget what the prompt is. So having that prompt on the board so people can go and turn back, it's like, oh, what is it that we're discussing again? They can go and look and find that. That's really important as well. So let's start with, let me see, what is your date of birth, Alexis? Or your month of birth? It's August. Okay, so you go first. Let me pass you the mic and I'll have you.
My name is Alexis. I'm in the chemistry program, and honestly, I don't really recall a time where I felt included. I don't know. Yeah,
Do you feel included here today?
I feel included today.
Yay, that's something. So today, Alexis feels included. Sarah.
Hello, my name is Sarah Idacavage. I'm in the fashion media program, a new hire.
Oh, welcome to SMU.
And as far as a time I felt included, well, I did just finish my PhD, so I was taking courses for 4 years. So I feel like I have a lot of experience with things that were not very inclusive.
Good. Yeah.
For teachers, but a few of the professors that had a pretty profound impact on me were the ones that were extremely prepared to, let's say, yeah, I think just prepared to lead the discussions with, breaking into people group. I mean, these are things I also do as an educator, but like the ones that already went into the classroom being like, this is the structure of our activities and sharing out versus just kind of free balling it, which is the normal, I think, PhD level teacher approach.
Yeah, they just go and hope everything will be organic. And sometimes that recipe is not a good recipe for success.
No.
And that's exactly one of the points that we're going to talk about this is having structure. Structure is very important in an inclusive teaching environment. So that goes into what we will talk about. What is inclusive teaching and what we'll talk about today. So a lot of times people think about like disabilities and including folks that might have, cognitive um, disabilities or just like, physical disabilities or impairments. And that also is part of inclusive teaching. But overall, it is about, creating a culture that all learners feel welcome. It is also about, including diverse, sources for your materials and making sure that students are represented. But, making sure that when people come into your classroom, they feel like it is a safe environment for learning, right? It's like we know about how the brain works is that, if you are having anxieties and you have things, those are not the best biological, I guess, ways for you to learn, to be accepted, to learn, right? Like you need to be feeling safe. You need to feel like you kind of belong to have the more optimal results for learning. So we're going to be covering a couple of different things. So we think about something more than just diverse readings. We're thinking about ensuring that everybody has success in your classroom. So the different ways we're going to talk about structure, syllabus design, classroom environment interactions, reflection, and UDL. Are you familiar with the term UDL or the acronym? Excellent. Today, you will become familiar with what UDL means, and particularly when you talk about inclusive teaching, is one of those frameworks that is really kind of interconnected with it. So we'll talk about it today. So we'll learn something new, but you should know about UDL. So Sarah, you mentioned particularly, right, like the faculty that were prepared, the discussions that were structured, something that you knew what you were expected to do, made you feel a little more included. And that's exactly what the high structure means in the context of inclusive teaching. So it's clear course organization, explicit expectations, scaffolding learning, and that's what we're talking about, consistent routines, structured group work. So even when you tell people to go into groups, maybe giving rules for each of the participants in the group, not just saying, hey, you go into the group and then figure out what's going to happen in the group, right? Like having a structure, transparent assignment design, and also accessible course materials that all of the students in the class can access. And when you think about like assessing and also giving the students to practice the things that they're going to be assessed,
So creating a flow so they can practice the skills that, they're going to be asked to kind of demonstrate at the end of the term. So creating formative assessments that you can provide that feedback and the students feel prepared. Then also creating clear objectives for each class. It sounds kind of a little commonsensical, that people would do that, but it's not a common practice a lot of the times. I conduct a lot of teaching observations, and sometimes like faculty just are very organic. They just want to just go straight into kind of the content, but they don't even stop and say, okay, this is what we're going to cover today. These are the objectives. So it's kind of an interesting thing, like provide a little bit of structure, be transparent of what be expected of folks. The other thing is, right, when you ask students to do certain things in your class, you might consider doing some things, right? So if you ask them to read something for your class, one way they can make students feel a little more included is that you can provide guiding questions for the reading ahead of time so that they know exactly the sections of the reading that they need to be paying attention to. So some guiding questions can allow them to focus more on what will be expected of them, or which parts of the text are more important than others that they need to be paying attention to. If you lecture, you can provide some skeleton outlines. Are you familiar with the concept of skeleton outlines? Yes? Do you want to, pick a guess of what that might be, Alexa? Yeah, it could be. So imagine like even this presentation that I'm doing here. For instance, I would imagine if I provide the students with a copy of this presentation, but I take some of the stuff out so that as they are in class and I'm talking about these things and they are my presentation on the screen, they can take notes and fill in the information. Absolutely. So you can hand out a skeleton outline for them of the content that you're covering, but not with all the information. You intentionally go ahead. No, please just make the noise. Like this is, yes, go ahead and eat. Go ahead. Don't feel like timid about eating. The inclusive teaching house that you can eat in this class. So providing a handout of the lecture or the presentation, but remove some of the things out so that the student has to fill in as they are in class paying attention. The other thing is like, if you are prompting for discussion, making sure that the prompt or the question is accessible and it's visible and everybody can, know what they're expected to do. Okay. So the other thing, like, it starts from the syllabus, right? Like designing inclusive syllabi is very, very important. And when we think about the inclusive syllabi, there's three things that you should think about. Tone, right? One of the ways that I think about this, whenever I look at my syllabi, I look at the different sections. And if I put the phrase because I said so after and it goes with, it's probably not very inclusive. Right? So you need to explain why you're asking the student certain things and create a tone that is welcoming, that is not like you giving orders, understanding that the learning environment is something that you want everybody to participate. And as the instructor, you end up learning with that experience as well, right? So make sure that you have this welcoming language. The other thing is consider including a statement articulating your commitment to diversity. So if you just Google, a diversity statement, you find a bunch of different options that you can kind of tweak a little bit, but including a diversity statement saying that all students are welcome in your class just kind of sets the tone for the class. Accessibility, making sure that all of the materials that you put together are accessible for all of the students in your class. So this goes back to potentially students that might have a disability or impairment, having those in mind, even when you don't know if you will have a student that will have a disability, design the class thinking about those students or potentially having those students. So the other thing is like, offer clear expectations of what will be expected in the class and ensure accessibility in the design of the format, which goes into UDL that we'll talk in a second. So the other thing is thinking about being a great facilitator, right? The good thing about knowing some of these inclusive teaching techniques is that it helps you in all facets of your life, because it's not just in the classroom, but any conversation, any presentation. It's nice for you to know these techniques and implement them. And say that one of the quotes here, and all the quotes in this book or in this presentation, are taken from this inclusive teaching book by Vijay Sathy and Kelly Hogan. It's like an inclusive mindset and collection of facilitation skills can be transferred to any environment. So all these stuff can be helpful in your everyday lives. Okay, tips for excellent facilitation whenever you're trying to be inclusive. And that goes by your, better teachers. Plan questions ahead of time. Consider providing them to students in advance so they can prep. And if you call on them, they feel prepared. Set your own rules for engagement. One of the things that you can do in your first week of class is, with your students, come up with an agreement of classroom conduct and how the classroom environment will be. So it could be something that you can single out rules for dialogue and communication, and make them part of the activity. Use timers and clear communication to keep everyone on track. So if you have an activity, set a time. Make sure that the students know. I put just a timer on the slide because I knew that not a lot of people had signed up for the session, so I could kind of, just go quicker. But there's some built-in timers that you can just put in, like if you have a presentation. I've done that before in PowerPoint. They could put it in, like there's 2 minutes and it's a countdown. There's a click on it. It shows the countdown, or it could be like a progress bar that listens, and then at the end, like makes a sound. So you don't have to worry about it. It's built into the presentation. So providing clear instructions, give the students in verbally and writing, consider the space. So depending on the type of activity that you're planning for the class, if it's a discussion, maybe this is not the best environment, right, for a discussion. So just maybe kind of moving things around so that it's a better environment for everybody to be, able to talk and communicate and have a discussion. But I do understand that depending on the classroom that you're teaching, might not be able to do that, right? Some buildings will have desks and chairs, they're bolted. That won't be a place that you can move things around. So if you can, move your environment. And if you think about engaging every student, one of the things that you could do is consider, some active learning strategies. We will have a workshop coming up that will just talk about different active learning strategies, but a simple Google search and active learning strategy is going to show a bunch of different ways that you can kind of have things that you can add to your class that can engage all students. Some examples are here. I mean, the think, pair, share, tried and true. Everybody knows about it. So give time for the students to think about the answer. Give them time to think about the answer, write it down. Then, they can pair with a buddy, share with another. Then they share with the class. Hold a class discussion, small group discussion. Remember, providing roles for each of the group members. So if you also do a simple Google search, just like, roles and group activities, and give you some examples of roles that you can give to each of the students. And those are things that you can kind of rotate around depending on the group of activities that you have. But also thinking about, opportunities for independent problem solving and polling, not just by hand, but also using an electronic system. So at SMU, we have access to Poll Everywhere. So if you want, a digital tool for polling, you can request one of those accounts. The Academic Technology Services Director from your school can help you kind of, give you a tour of what it's done. The learning curve is really low for these techniques, and students can participate their phone anonymously. So sometimes somebody might be a little more shy to, participate verbally. They can use their phones or devices to participate, and that might give them a better opportunity to be, honest about their opinions. So far, any questions about what I've covered? Because I've been kind of. If you do have any questions, you can just raise a hand. I'll stop at any time, but I'll give you an opportunity to kind of ask anything. Okay, let's truck along. So, talking about putting the name tags, like the name tents. It'd be nice to learn your students' names. Depending on how many students you have, it might be more challenging. In a class of 2, really easy. But if you have, 50, 100, it might be hard. So do the name tense. It's not a bad thing, and you'll be able to know people's names. And, when I had large classes, I use that for attendance as well. So something that you can use. If you see weird behavior, microaggressions, intervene immediately. Don't let that stuff linger. So address it immediately, say that, the classroom is a safe space, that microaggressions are not allowed. Don't let students feel like they don't have a safe environment in your class. Then think about this. The value of reflection is very important. And there's different ways. Like I always, whenever I create my lesson plans, I always have a section for notes so that I try a particular technique and then I can write myself some feedback if it went well or not in my teaching. So I continue doing. So if you tried something and you feel like, it didn't go well for some students, write that note and then we'll kind of modify that for the future. So it's a quote from the book, developing teaching expertise. There's no single start line and no finish line. Teaching is a craft and we need to be always improving, right? So take notes, journal about the things that work and kind of change things up. And what tools and strategies do you want to keep using in a class? What new tools, strategies you like to try? Sorry, I have to re-emphasize the cat because, that makes the day better. So you're welcome for the cat image of the day. Then solicit feedback from the students. Another way that they can feel included. So midterm feedback surveys. All of your courses here at SMU have this tool called Feedback Box that is kind of built in already in the menu. And that is a tool that students can provide anonymous feedback at any point of the course. It's a little tricky because in order for you to receive that feedback, you do have to click on that thing at least once. And then otherwise the messages, you'll be receiving them, but they stay unread. And that's one of the biggest challenges of the tool that apparently IT on the back end can see that there's a lot of unread messages. I would say encourage students to provide feedback, constructive feedback, and read them. There's a way for you to also reply to the feedback on Feedback Box. So I'll encourage you to use that. You can then ask for, do midterm feedback surveys, which are incredible tool. And you can do it through Feedback Box or in a more formal way that you're asking like specific questions to the student about your teaching. But when you do that, make sure to try to implement some of those suggestions from the feedback, right? Because if you don't do anything, it's just like the student evaluations at the end of the term. And there's another term for those evaluations. They're called the post-mortem evaluations, right? Because you get a feedback, but what can you do with that information? So midterm feedback surveys, you can actually do something that can help the students in the latter half of the term. And if you do implement some of those suggestions or take some of that feedback to heart, the students really feel included. So that's something to consider. Oh, and try to get a colleague to provide you feedback. Get somebody to come sit in your class. The CTE provide teaching observations. The benefit of the CTE coming as a neutral kind of, helper. Like I usually come to your class and try to be as inconspicuous as I can. And it's not tied to, your performance and evaluation. Is just, I'm there to help you. So you get that information. I'll give you pointers on the things that you're doing well. And I'll give you some pointers to do things even better. So you can do that with a CT or just ask a colleague to come and observe you. So then UDL, that's the term that I talked about. It's universal design for learning. So it has to do with making the content accessible for students, but it's more than that. Is whenever you are designing the class, it's thinking about all the possible ways that the students might access your course, making sure that everybody would be able to have access. So as you're creating something with images, it's making sure that from the get-go, you have, alternate text for the images that you're putting into your presentations and online content. Is making sure that you're using the headers, like using hierarchy within the headers and body of your documents. So it's thinking about creating closed captioning for your videos if you're doing videos, and not just thinking, oh, will there ever be somebody that might not be able to see this video? You're just ahead of time thinking all the possible ways and like who might not be able to access its information. That's what you should be thinking as you're creating the content, and then thinking about different ways, right? Presenting the information and content in different ways. So varying the style of delivery and varying the ways they provide information to the students, and which provides multiple means of representation. Differentiate the ways that the students can express what they know, which provide means of multiple ways of action and expression. So not just, the only way that you'll be assessed is papers. Maybe create other opportunities for assessment. Stimulate interest and motivation for learning. So multiple means of engagement. And that's pretty much the gist of the presentation. So you should have plenty of time to go to your class. Do you have any questions for me, or in addition to that? I highly encourage, if you don't have a copy of this book, this is a good little investment for you to have. And at the end of every chapter of this book, there are, specific kind of pointers on things that you can do. So let's see, like, what is chapter 3? So there's an instructor checklist for the syllabus, for instance. Check the overall tone of your syllabus and aim for a supportive and warm tone. Read the syllabus as if you were a student. Use student-centered language that is invitational. Avoid capitals for emphasis. Use first-person statements in your syllabus. I, you, and we, rather than third-person statements as students shall. Present an inclusion statement along with incorporating your inclusive practices in different aspects of your course. It goes on and on and on, right? But these are very practical pointers, at the end of every chapter. So have this as kind of like a resource that you have in your office. The other thing that I would suggest as well, we talk about generative AI and how AI tools can be used for teaching. If you do have the paid version of ChatGPT, and one of the things that you can explore GBTs that people have created. So what does that mean? That if you have a paid ChatGPT account, you can create a bot and train it to do certain things. So every time that you interact with these bots, you can put documents and things, they learn that information. So some of these pre-created bots, they have some for inclusive teaching, and you can put in your syllabus and say, make my syllabus, give me some pointers on how to make my syllabus more inclusive, or, making sure, change the language of my syllabus to a more inclusive language. So those tools can be like chef's kiss to make the work a lot quicker. So I encourage you to peruse through, but if you don't have the paid version of ChatGPT, you can still go to other tools and do that, like submit your syllabus and get a review and ask the bots to highlight sections of your syllabus that can be more inclusive based on the literature about inclusive teaching that is out there. So Perplexity will be a good tool, because then even it will show you Perplexity is, a generative AI kind of bot. It will show you where it got the information from, kind of the sources that, it used to kind of scan your document and give you those pointers. So just try that out with different ones. Could be, with Gemini or Copilot or something, because all of them will give you different answers and different outputs. But that's one way that you can really be using these tools to help your class be better. And same thing with, assignment instructions, making sure that you run it, how can we make this assignment better, or these assignment instructions better? And you can even submit, put your rubric and put in, or create rubrics even with AI, which will give you a little more guidance for the students, what will be expected of them. So that's it. Actually, thank you. Just a very, very important reminder. We have cookies from JD's Chippery in person. If you're reporting there, just start salivating or watching the reporting. Please get some cookies on your way out. But thank you for coming.